Now coming to tables and figures. So if your statistical report is of 100 pages, at least there would be 60 tables and 30 figures. So how many of them would you include in your manuscript? So restrict the number which is required to make an argument of your paper. So only select those tables and figures which you will make an argument based on these tables and figures, because tables and figures are one which are prominent and the reader is more likely to look at the tables and the figures. So use only those tables and figures which will help you to make your justification or argument more stronger. As far as the number is concerned, how many tables and how many figures are to be included in the manuscript, always check for the journal's guideline, because many of the journals they will specify that only 4 or 5 tables and 1 or 2 figures would be accepted. So look at the journal's guidelines and based on that you select the number of tables and figures. Generally we use tables for giving mean or standard deviation or some numbers. So tables are used for giving specific values, whereas figures we use for showing trends or relationship between the data. So figures are used for showing relations. One of the another principle that one should remember is do not duplicate data in the graphs and the tables. If you have shown something in the graph, do not include the same data in the tables, because again, one is the constraint for space, constraint for number of words, and second is it's a duplication of data. You already have presented that in the table and you're again presenting it in the graph. Doesn't make any sense, because your argument will not become more stronger if you include the same data in the table and the graph. So do not duplicate the data in tables and figures. Now tables and figures, they need to be given headings, and the heading for table is called as a header and the heading for figure is called as the captions. Usually we give headings for the table on the top and caption for the figure at the bottom. So when you're writing tables or figures, make sure that you also give units of measurements. Many of the times we only see y-axis. For example, there's a height or a weight. We do not find the units. So always try to give units on the x-axis as well as the y-axis. Column in the table and the both axes in the graph should be labeled, including the units. If you used original, if you use some paper or some article or figure and diagram from the original source which has already been published before, so acknowledge that this figure has been taken from the original source and you have a written permission to use that particular figure, diagram or a picture, so from the copyright holder, and you have taken his permission to reproduce in your own article. So when we give tables and figures, usually try to give tables and figures on a separate page, tables and figures separately, and usually after the reference section. So when you are submitting the paper for publication, we give tables and figures at the end of the references. But again, look at the guideline of the journal. If the guideline of the journal says that no, it has to come in the text itself, then do not make it separately after the references. But most of the journals would ask you to submit tables and figures separately and the main text separately. Tables and numbers need to be numbered consecutively in the order of the first citation. So wherever the first citation comes, you write figure number 1, figure number 2 accordingly. So figure number 3 cannot come as the first and then you have the figure number 1. So look at the consecutive numbers. Now these are the different types of graphs that one can use in the manuscript. Now which is the graph which has to be used for what purpose? So if you're using pie charts are preferred for giving comparisons. So if you have seen responses in the form of yes and no, pie chart could be good. If you want to present the population, pie chart could be good. So out of 100%, how many? If you want to present that percentage, then pie chart should be used. So pie chart is on the above the table. Below the table on your right side, you have the column or the bar chart. Where do I use column chart or the bar chart? When I want to compare the values of different categories, when they are independent of each other. For example, here I would have taken the responses of industry or NIH, government, mixed or other. So these are independent variables of each other. So if I want to present the independent values of different categories, then I would use column and the bar chart. But within the same category, if I have 100 people and I want to break them up in different proportions, then I would use pie chart. Where I would use line chart or the line graph, so it plots a series of related values, which shows that there is some relationship between x-axis and y-axis. For example, on x-axis we have days, and on y-axis, for example, there is some parameter, maybe increase in the nutritional value or HB or something like that. So as the day pass on, the value is increasing. So I can clearly see that there is a trend. With increased duration of treatment, the response is progressively increasing. So this chart clearly gives me idea that there is a relationship between the parameters of x-axis and the y-axis. So this is how we select which chart and which diagram has to be used for what kind of data. If your article has images, like for example X-ray films or pictures, diagrams, or the diagnostic images, photo pathology specimens, make sure that they are suitable for printing, because once your paper gets accepted and it gets published in the paper, they want to print that journal. So your image should be suitable for printing. Otherwise, the image can be very blurred and then it doesn't look good on the published paper. So therefore, we need to have the images which are sharp and glossy. If we are using the photograph of any person or any thing, so we need to have the written permission to use that photograph. As far as the size, specifications, height, width, or the even the pixels of that image, we need to look at what are the guidelines from that particular journal. We have to adhere to the specific guidelines regarding the length and the width of the images. Lastly, coming to discussion part, this is very important because this is the one section where your ability to analyze how good you are a writer. So that ability is going to be checked based on the discussion. So discussion checks your ability to analyze the data, what you have written in the discussion, I mean the result section. How do we evaluate and how do we interpret this data effectively? And that could be applicable. I mean, based on that discussion, the clinicians are going to take it or throw the results of your study. So interpretation of data and discussion is very significant, very important. So in the discussion section, we have to write main findings and we have to give the context of other people's work. So how are your results compared to somebody else's work which has been done in the similar area or the same therapeutic segment? If your findings are different than the others or if they are matching with others, we need to give explanation. If your findings, especially if your findings are different than the others, what could be the reason your findings have been different than what has been published before? So those alternative explanations are very important in discussion. Finally, we have to give our work in perspective. Perspective in the sense, what is for the clinician? Why clinician should spend time in reading your article, whether it's going to improve his clinical practice, whether it is going to change his clinical behavior. So this work in perspective has to be given in the discussion. One has to be cautious when we generalize this data and provide implications. Now, just to give a background, I mean, a few days back, we discussed that paper from the medical college where a lot of medical students were not aware about blood infection being transmitted through the blood. Now, if I generalize the statement saying that X number of percentage of medical students do not know that infection can be transmitted to the blood. Now, can I generalize to the medical student because the study was done in only one center? Not even in city, and we are saying that medical students do not know this particular fact. So generalizing this fact would be, you have to be a little cautious. Maybe you can say in my study, in my center, this was the finding. So you cannot generalize your finding to the whole community for that particular population because that would have huge implications. And you need to discuss what should happen next. So you have done the study, so what? The people should follow you, or should people do another study to confirm your results, or there could be another different kind of study that you want to perform. So we need to show what is to be done next. In the discussion section, one of the important part is to write strengths and limitations of the study. Strength is because you know better what you have done and why your study is should be weighted better than the other study. But at the same time, be transparent and say that these are my limitations. Many trials, they do not show the limitations. So limitation has two important perspectives. One is that you are clear and you're showing that these are my limitations. So the next researchers gets an idea, can I overcome these limitations and do another study? So for another researcher, this becomes another area of research. So you're helping other people to do research by showing your limitations. And you're also safeguarding your results, saying that I have clearly said these are my limitations. Within this limitation, these are my findings. So you are increasing your transparency. At the same time, you are helping other researchers to get idea for doing further research. In the discussion, also write how our findings they add to the previous knowledge, or is just a duplication of data what somebody has done, I also did it, or is it significantly different than what the previous knowledge was? Are there any confounding factors? Was there any specific impact of your findings on the general population or that particular category of people? In the discussion section, again, as we kept on saying in all the sections, do not give non-critical information, be it result section, be it discussion section, be it introduction section. Write only the critical information and avoid giving non-critical information. In the conclusion, try to address what are your findings. So based on the study results, how can you conclude your study result? Do not oversell the conclusion. Meaning that if you have done the survey and you are saying that based on your survey, the whole world should follow you, that is overselling it. So do not oversell it, because it might have possible implications on the clinical practice or the policy. Ensure that your conclusions, they are directly related to the hypothesis that we initially postulated in our introduction and objective. So just check whether what was your objective and what is your conclusion. Is your objective talking to your conclusion and vice versa, conclusion talking to your objective. Remember that unless you have done RCT, that is randomized controlled trial, for all other clinical trials, be it a retrospective trial or observational study, there are only testable hypotheses and observed associations. There is no strong proof of cause and effect. And therefore, when we make a conclusion, do not make a strong conclusion to oversell your fact, because these are only associations and the testable hypotheses. RCT can say that there is a cause and relation. This was done and therefore this is the result, and therefore the results are applicable to this population. So that RCT can address that, but not the other studies. Acknowledgement and disclosures of finances is very important, because if you have received a financial assistance and you do not include into your manuscript, that means you are hiding the fact somebody has supported financially, so the results might be biased. But if you have already mentioned that I received the financial support for this study from such and such company or association, then the reader knows that how to interpret this data and how to perceive this result. So writing assistance is very important. Write the name of the professional writers or the medical writers or any other contributor who has significantly helped you in manuscript development. As we talked about previously, if somebody has done a significant work in manuscript writing and his name does not feature in the acknowledgement and does not feature in the authorship as well, then you are actually not giving the credit to the work that person has done. So even if he has contributed in medical writing, try to acknowledge the person who has supported you for writing this paper. Next. We already talked about permission and acknowledgement of people. If you're using somebody's photograph or somebody's data and you're putting in your own paper, be it a graph, photograph, or the table, picture, or case report, we need to have permission to use that from that particular person or whosoever you are, that property belongs to. Now coming to another important section, writing references. Now, where are the references required and where are the references not required? Now, references are required for the information which is not common knowledge. If the knowledge is very common, everybody knows about it, then there is no need to give a reference. For example, I say India is a large country. India is a country of so many languages or so many states. Everybody knows about it. So you don't have to give a reference for it. We need to give references for the knowledge which is not common and information which is not obtained personally. In your paper, you have written something and that information you have not obtained on yourself. You have taken it from somewhere, someplace, some person. So you have to give references for those particular things which are not obtained by your own. Regarding references, we have to adhere to the journals, policies, and formatting instructions, which is very obvious. Very important thing, another thing is that data on file, especially if you're working in the industry. The pharmaceutical companies might have done some studies, but they have not published it, and that is called as the data on file. So they have a data, but that data is not been published. So can we cite this as a reference? We need to check with the journal policy. Some journals allow that data on file can be used as a reference, though it is not published. But in case the reviewer asks for that data to be checked, the company should be able to provide that data which is on file. So we need to check whether this is allowed by the guideline or not allowed by the guideline. Next. Another important thing is we as far as possible, we should not give abstract as the references. So for example, some abstract has been presented in the conference and you want to put that abstract as a reference to your article. It may be okay to give abstract for 1 or 2 years, but if suppose the abstract has been presented 10 years before and you're writing a manuscript today, you preferably not to give abstract as a reference because that paper, abstract was presented 10 years before. Ideally, the author should have published that paper by now. If he has not published that paper now, that means either there was some issue in the publication, the quality of data was not good, or something we have to keep a suspicion for, and therefore try to avoid giving abstract as a reference as far as possible, unless it's a very, very recent abstract last year or a couple of years back. Another important thing for reference is that there are some articles where the author would have received a letter from the journal saying that your article has been accepted for publication, and this is called as the article in press. Article is not been published but is accepted. So we need to get a written permission to cite such paper, as well as we have to verify that they have been accepted for the publication. So we sometimes, suppose I am the author and I know that Dr. Shivamurthy has presented has a paper which has been accepted. So I might cite that paper and ask Dr. Shivamurthy to send me the acknowledgement in case my reviewer asks me, show me that this paper has been accepted for publication. So I should have the verification with me so that in case journal or the reviewer asks for it, we can provide it. Next. For referencing, there are two common methods which are used, and most of us are aware about this. One is Harvard style of referencing and second is Vancouver style of referencing. Now, what is the difference between Harvard and Vancouver style of referencing? In the Harvard type of referencing, we cite the references in the text paper, the paper, by giving the name of the author and the year of publication in the bracket, in the parenthesis. For example, Patil 2000, page number 60, in the bracket close. So this is the Harvard type of referencing. So in the main paper, we write the author name, year, and the page number. And at the end of the paper, after your conclusion, we write the references in a strictly alphabetical order, regardless of chronology. That means A, B, C, D, we follow in the referencing instead of numberings. So that is the difference between the Harvard and the Vancouver. So two things to be remembered in Harvard. One is in the main text, we write the author name, year, and the page number. And in the back side of the references at the end of the paper, we write alphabetical referencing. Whereas Vancouver style of referencing, most of the medical journals, they follow Vancouver type of referencing. And contrary to what we have seen in the Harvard type of referencing, in the Vancouver method, we write the Arabic numbers in the parentheses. And at the end of the paper, in the reference section, we number the references consecutively in the order which they have appeared in the text of your, either in the introduction or in the discussion section. So we number them consecutively from 1 to whatever number we refer to. So Harvard is alphabetical and Vancouver is numerical number. Next. From where we get these references, there are several databases available. One of the most common database that we follow is PubMed. We can use Embase, Scopus, Thomson Reuters Web Sciences, Cochrane Library, or Google Scholar. So from all of this, you can choose any of the library or all of the library to get your references and cite them. Coming to this submission, what happens? How should one go about the submission of manuscript? Next. One of the important things for submission is we need to select the journal. And when should we select the journal? As early as possible. Even before you start to write the article, select the journal, because there would be significant issues related to formatting or even related to style. I give one of example, one of the papers I wrote for one journal, and after the article was completely written, the author said that no, we don't want to publish and send it the article to this particular journal. We want to submit to another journal. Now, the previous article where the style or the formatting which I used for, the article allowed 4,000 words. And the next journal, what author selected, allowed only 2,000 words. So for me, it was very difficult now to reduce that content of 4,000 word to 2,000 word. So significant issues. So when you write a paper, be clear with the author that what is the journal that we are targeting. So according to that journal, I will format and I will style the article accordingly. When you want to submit to the journal, you can do pre-submission inquiries. You might have written an abstract. So you send that abstract to the editor and ask the editor, would this abstract be suitable or acceptable for publication in your paper? So usually the editor responds in very few days. So that avoids the delay in the review process. If you think that, I mean, the editor reverts saying that your article or this abstract is not suitable, I mean, you save on the time for review process. So you need to prepare the manuscript according, I mean, which we have written, and for which you have to do two things. One is you have to write a cover letter, and you have to prepare a title page. So title, I'll talk about that cover page and a title in next slide. So once the paper is submitted, it goes for a review. Then you might be asked to revise the paper based on the reviewer's comment, and then you have to resubmit the paper after the revision of those comments. Next. So for this, we already talked about this. Adhere to journal's guideline when you prepare the manuscript. Consistency of data we have checked. I mean, we have talked about that. So consistency of data has to be looked into what has been written in the result section, discussion section, and abstract. Look for the consistency of the numbers, figures, percentages across. Finally, before submitting the paper, always check the grammar, because we have seen that a lot of times the article might get also rejected because of the poor English language and a lot of grammatical errors. Include all critical information. Do not miss critical information in just, I mean, the objective of reducing the number of word counts. So try to get all the information which is critical. Next. In the cover letter, so I told you that manuscript is one part, cover letter is second part, and the title page is the third part. So in the cover letter, avoid typographical errors, because that gives a very bad impression, because this is the one page that the editor is going to read. And if a lot of typographical errors on the cover page itself, then he thinks that, I mean, he has an idea what comes in the main paper. Clearly articulate the research purpose, why you wanted to do this research. Detail prior correspondence, if you have already done correspondence with him, what was the review. In the cover letter, write clearly that we have adhered to the regulatory guidelines, clinical practice guidelines that have been met. Registration number, if you have done the registration of clinical trial, provide that also. So that gives an idea to the editor that this paper looks to be good and it can be considered for publication and it can be sent for peer review. Reinforce that you have adhered to all the disclosure guidelines that we talked about, the acknowledgement section, financial guidance or technical assistance, whatever support you have received, try to acknowledge all of them in the cover letter. Disclose all full or partial prior releases of data. So when we talk about redundant publication or the duplication of publication, cover letter may you write clearly that whether part of it or some section of it has been already published or not published. So author also, I mean, the editor also gets an idea. This is the original research and not been published before. Next. So that was about the cover page. Coming to the title page. On the title page, we need to write article title, which is about 10 to 12 words. We have to write names of all authors, their institutional affiliations, their highest academic degrees. Contact information of corresponding author is required on the title page, but when you submit the paper, online, usually they ask for contact information of all the authors, including emails and the phone numbers, because the journal wants to send all correspondence to all the authors, but the main correspondence would be coming to the corresponding author. You also have to make a running title. If your title is too large, then you have to cut short and make a running title for that particular paper. Always give the word count, because the journals specify that in the abstract you can have only 250 words. In the main text you can have only 4,000 words. So you need to show them that my abstract contains so many words, my main text contains so many words. And usually for counting the word, we exclude the abstract, acknowledgement, figure legends, and the references. So those 4,000 words are excluding references and the other parts of it. So which is significant enough size to write a paper for. Also write how many figures and how many tables you are including in the paper. So reading the cover page and the title page, the editor knows that what is coming and whether you are adhering to all the guidelines. Instead of going through your 12 pages of paper, he just reads these 2 papers and feels that this paper can be submitted for the peer review process. Next. Lastly, what happens in the peer review process? Next. So you submit the paper data to the journal. So you submitted the article to the journal. The first thing happens in the editorial review. The first review is the editorial review, and editor screens this paper whether this paper is suitable for submission to peer review or it should be rejected straight away. So there might be a rejection within only first stage. The editor himself rejects your paper. Next. So the paper has not gone to the peer review. But if editor feels that there is a value in this paper, the editor sends that paper to peer reviews. Then peer reviewers, they review your paper, give the comment to the editor. Editor sends back that paper to the author. Author makes the revision. The paper goes back to the editor, and editor sometimes might go back again to the peer reviewer, showing that these were your suggestions, and this is what author has made the changes in, and the peer reviewer then they take the decision. Next. So peer reviewers, they say, okay, this paper can be published. So communication is given to the editor, and the editor communicates that response to you, whether your article has been accepted or has been rejected. So this is what the whole process is all about. Next. Now, if my first critical success factor for publication is the editorial review, so how do I successfully pass the editorial review? So what editor looks at is, editor looks at whether the paper, the subject of the paper is of a concern to the readers. If I'm writing a paper of radiology in a pharmacology journal, editor will reject it, saying that this is not of a concern to my readers. So that could be one of the reasons of rejection. Second, subject with current and ongoing interest. Suppose there is some ongoing interest which is coming up. For example, couple of months, the last month we have that BMJ article, and we submitted our comment and it got immediately accepted because that was the current topic of interest. So if there is a controversial topic and on that controversial topic you write a paper or you provide a comment, there are high chances that your paper might get accepted because that is the area of interest for that particular moment. Editor also will look at whether the article is written in a readable style, English, and the grammatical mistakes. So these are the things that editor looks for. Editor doesn't go into the details of the paper. Broadly overview he gives, and if he satisfies with these facts, then he sends the paper for peer review. Next. In the peer review, the peer reviewers, they look for validity, whether the data what you have submitted is valid. Is it significant for that community of readers who are going to read this paper, and whether this article is original. To know whether this article is original, they might communicate or they might ask you to send them the original data. Sometimes they might ask you to send the ethics committee permission later. Sometimes they might ask you to submit the original data what has been collected. So it depends upon reviewer to reviewer. So this is how the papers are reviewed. So once the paper is reviewed, the article might be rejected, or reviewers might respond you to modify the article based on the comments. The paper what we have revised, sometimes the editor might send back to the peer reviewer, or sometimes if the comments are very minor, the paper might not go to the peer reviewer, but editor himself take a decision, okay, comments were minor and this paper can be accepted because those minor comments have been incorporated. Or sometimes the paper might be sent to the original reviewers, because if there are major comments and a critical comment from the reviewer, the article usually go back to the reviewer. Or editor might take a call of sending that article to new reviewers for resubmission. And what is the review process? One can go on the journal's website, or you can contact the journal and you can find out whether the review process is blinded, non-blinded, how many reviewers are going to review it. Usually on the instruction to author, there is a column in every journal. So if you read the instruction to author, you will get an idea how the process of review happens for that particular journal. Once you read that instructions to author, you can set the expectations of the review process. So you can expect that this is going to happen because the review is blinded or the review is open, and they usually will tell you what are the approximate timelines for review process. So if you're resubmitting the paper after revision, acknowledge and address all reviewers and editorials comment courteously. Follow the journal's guidelines for submitting revised manuscript. Ensure that the resubmission addresses all the comments thoroughly and in detail. It is not necessary that you accept all what has been said by the reviewer. Sometimes you may not agree with the reviewer. So in such cases, so if you do not agree with the reviewer and you feel that the comment is incorrect or unjustified, we need to provide explanation why you think that this comment is incorrect or not justified, and you might provide available literature to support your justification or your comment. Try to avoid easy fixes. Do not delete the information. The easiest thing is, suppose somebody has raised a concern, we say that, so I have deleted this part, so now the paper can be accepted. So try not to delete the information. Instead, try to give explanation why you want to keep that information, and explain this could be a shortcoming of your study, and somebody else might overcome that shortcoming and do a next study. So incorporate suggestions for improvement in the future studies. So if your paper gets rejected, there are two choices. Either you appeal to the decision or you submit to another journal. Now, if you want to appeal the decision, you have to check whether the appeal is a viable option with that journal. Many of the journal will say that the editor decision is final decision. So you don't have a choice to appeal. So you have to go to the another journal. So article can also be get rejected if it is not the priority of the journal. So don't get disheartened that my article is getting rejected frequently. The reason, one of the reasons could be that the journal does not have priority for the subject that you have studied for. So if there is a rejection, you can submit to another journal. But when you submit to another journal, try to include all suggestions given by the reviewers of the previous journal, because that will strengthen, that will make your manuscript more stronger. When you are submitting for the next journal, follow the best practices of both the original journal as well as the resubmission of the newer journal, so that your article is more strong. In the cover letter, I mean, it's up to you, but if you clarify or in a transparent manner say that my article was rejected from the previous journal because of these reasons, and I have rectified those reasons and I want to publish in your journal, so that can also be done in the cover letter. What is most important is selection process is not understood completely. So every journal has a different selection process for journal. So selection process is important, but unfortunately it is least understood. Therefore, we should not take rejection as our negative experience. Only what we can do is we can ensure that our paper is scientifically robust and as complete as possible, so that we are satisfied. The reviewer or the editor might not be, may not be his priority, but we are satisfied because scientifically paper is robust and complete and it can be accepted by other journals. Once the paper is accepted, the editor will send you the copy of edited version, just to confirm that what is coming in the publication is as per what you have written in the original article. This is the last stage where you can rectify your mistake, because the article has come for the proofreading to you. However, we should not do major changes in the proofreading page, because the article has already been accepted by the peers, because proofreading article will not go back to the peer reviewers. It will only go back to the technical team and only back to the editor. So if you are changing too many changes, and if they change the meaning of the paper, which the peer review has already accepted, and you are changing the meaning, that is not allowed at this stage of acceptance. So finally, this is my last slide. So this is 4 sections that we talked about: manuscript writing, submission, review, and revision. Just to remember, or I mean, to make that we are not missing anything, remember this acronym IMRAD. I stand for Introduction, M for Materials and Methods, R for Results, and D for Discussion. And finally, conclusion and references. Adhere to the scientific principles, ethical principles, and the medical writing principle. My last message would be: don't get disheartened by rejection, because there are several reasons for article rejection. Quality is not the only reason for rejection. If your quality is good and the article is robust, don't get disheartened. You can submit to another journal. So that's about manuscript writing. Thank you so much for your patience hearing, and once again I apologize for delay in starting the presentation. Thank you.